A woman's life is snuffed out in moments by a person she didn't even know. It's a crime that put the people of Dothan in fear, and after all these years, justice has never been served. This week, News 4's Ken Curtis remembers the Chapelwood Killer. He joins us live with part one of his special series. Ken?
It's been more than 25 years since what some consider the most heinous crime in Dothan's history occurred. But after all this time, people remember. It's not just what happened, it's the way it happened and who it happened to that makes this story so bizarre. Ozark, Alabama, a small, quaint town, gateway to the home of Army aviation, a good place to raise a child. Marilyn K. Mitchell grew up in Ozark, a good kid with good parents and a promising future. But in the blink of an eye, her life was cut short. Very short. Marilyn K. Mitchell was the all-American girl, the kind you'd want your son to marry. Intelligent, energetic, ambitious, and beautiful.
The victim in this case was a little girl that had an impeccable character. If anybody ever wanted a daughter, she would have been the perfect person.
Marilyn not only had a good childhood, she also had the brightest of futures.
Marilyn was a beautiful young girl fixing to start her life. She was getting married. She'd graduated from college and was moving
into a townhouse in the West Dothan neighborhood known as Chapelwood.
It was a very safe community.
A good place to raise a family. Very quiet, or at least it was until May 15, 1990.
There is no arrest. There's no word of any possible suspects.
It was a pure and simple sex crime.
Not just a sex crime. This was murder.
When I walked into the bottom floor of the townhouse, it looked okay. Little things like, it looks like she was preparing a cake or something. There was a can of orange mandarins that's on the counter that was half opened, and a bowl was out. So as if she was preparing a cake.
And that's exactly what Marilyn was doing. Ready to take a break from her move-in to go home to Ozark. There she would celebrate her mother's 51st birthday. But what was to be a night of celebration turned into a night of horror. Marilyn Mitchell was only 22 years old, way too young with what happened to her. So exactly what did occur at that Chapelwood townhome? That part of the story tonight at 10.
Ken, thanks a lot. The Chapelwood Killer special series, by the way, airs through Thursday.
Tonight at 10, we begin our special report on the Chapelwood Killer and something very dark in Dothan's history. A 22-year-old lady who became a victim of a very horrible crime. We're joined now by Ken Curtis with another installment of Ken Curtis Remembers the Chapelwood Killer.
Yeah, Natasha, first to note that some viewers could find the nature of this story upsetting. It is a very intense story, for this is the tale of tragedy, a crime that left people in Dothan shocked and scared. A crime that took the life of a young woman who had everything going for her. This is the story of the Chapelwood Killer. Marilyn Mitchell seemingly had everything going for her. A degree from the University of Alabama, a nursing job at a big hospital, and soon she'd marry the man of her dreams. Growing up in nearby Ozark, Marilyn decided she would live in Dothan. So she rented a townhome in the nice neighborhood known as Chapelwood.
People felt safe in that part of Dothan.
But feeling safe and being safe would soon become two very different things. On the afternoon of May 15, 1990, Marilyn was still proudly moving into her new home
It was a shock.
when somebody showed up at her door. And what happened next? It's almost unspeakable.
He got into the house and then started the rape and murder of Marilyn Mitchell. And once the killing frenzy started, it was a lot of stab wounds. 38, that's correct.
Wayne May is a member of WTVY's news management team these days. Back then, he's what was called a street reporter.
I remember trying to work the story and getting there and realizing this is only a few blocks from where I live. And it was one of the most personal moments that I had ever felt on the job, because this was right around the corner.
Marilyn was planning to bake a cake, then head to her family home in Ozark to celebrate her mother's 51st birthday. Instead, it was her mom, Norma, who would come to Dothan.
I heard a lady just hollering and screaming and crying, and I knew that what that sound was. And she came through the crowd and pierced the line where the police officers had taped up, and she was looking for her daughter like any good parent would do.
But Marilyn Mitchell was dead, and the Chapelwood neighborhood in shock and scared out of its wits.
I remember talking to neighbors, and their wives were concerned, very concerned about what had happened.
Concerned about a killer who had committed a crime beyond imagination. A killer so callous that after raping Marilyn Mitchell and stabbing her almost 40 times, he took a shower.
And he cleaned himself up and took time to smoke a cigarette.
Dumping ashes on the body of a woman he had only minutes earlier raped and killed. Now, a killer was on the loose, and he would remain that way for quite some time. There's a startling fact about the search for him. We all know the saying, you can't see the forest for the trees. We'll explain tomorrow at 6 when I continue to remember the Chapelwood Killer. Natasha.
All right, Ken, thank you so much for that. This week, Ken Curtis is profiling one of the most horrific crimes in Dothan's history, the needless taking of a 22-year-old woman's life. He joins us live with more on a story that left a community in shock. Ken?
This community in shock, as a matter of fact, a crime that led police on a passionate search for the killer. Retired Dothan police investigator Bob Sorrells, for the first time in years, returned to the scene of the crime. Remembering, though perhaps not wanting to, what happened in this normally quiet Chapelwood neighborhood of Dothan. Remembering May 15, 1990, when a man went into a townhome that 22-year-old Marilyn Mitchell had just rented.
And it wound up in the upstairs bedroom and landing area.
That's where Marilyn was raped and killed, stabbed 38 times.
And it looked like that she put up a horrendous fight.
But at only 100 pounds, Marilyn didn't have a chance. Her body found by the man she planned to marry just months later.
He walked up the stairs and was shocked.
They're calling this a homicide.
Very unsettling for an awful lot of people.
The cops were not just upset, they were angry.
And with their work cut out for them as perhaps like never before. Police routinely go on the assumption that crimes like Marilyn's murder are committed by someone the victim knew. So it was only natural the first person of interest was her fiancé, the man who found Marilyn's body. But
He did not do it.
so if he didn't, who did?
Someone with a seriously messed up in the head.
But who would be so messed up to commit a crime like this?
The evil one in a horrible way.
There was the neighbor who seemed to have an interest in Marilyn, then the doctor, the airline pilot, and some of her friends. All investigative roads, though, hit a dead end. But unknown to police at the time, just a couple of days after Marilyn Mitchell was murdered, they interviewed her killer. But he seemed to have an ironclad alibi.
He was at work. He was at work at that time, and that alibi seemed to hold water.
So the investigation into the murder of this bright and energetic young woman was a cold case for a long time. Even though just months after Marilyn Mitchell was killed, he tried to kill again. So when he tried to kill again, did that give police the man they so desperately sought? You might be surprised at the answer. An answer we'll give you tonight at 10.
All right, Ken, thanks so much. Ken's series on the Chapelwood Killer will continue through tomorrow. A man brutally rapes and kills a young woman. It's a crime that left a town in terror, and police are left baffled, even though the killer tried to kill again. News 4's Ken Curtis joins us live with another segment in his special reports on the Chapelwood Killer. Ken?
Hi, Natasha. All this happened more than 25 years ago, but it's a crime that still lingers fresh in the minds of many. This young woman, just out of college, was moving into a new townhome in this tranquil West Dothan neighborhood.
There were a lot of young families in Chapelwood back then.
A great place to raise children, safe, with no crime problems.
None. Peaceful. Chapelwood area. Very, middle class America.
Or at least it was until May 15, 1990.
To have something like that happen,
a man somehow got into the home that Marilyn Mitchell was moving into. He raped, then killed the 22-year-old woman, stabbing her 38 times. Doug Valeska has been district attorney for 3 decades and has prosecuted many heinous crimes.
It's still fresh in my mind, my memory. I will never forget it till the day I die.
He, like everybody who lived here back then, had never seen a crime like this.
it really upset a lot of people that were concerned about their own safety and whether or not this person might strike again.
And their worst fears turned into reality. Barely a year later, he did strike again.
And it was the same type of crime, although it didn't result in a death.
Less than 4 miles from where he attacked Marilyn Mitchell, the killer attacked a woman in this storage warehouse.
Where he choked a young girl, stuffed her in the toilet, tried to kill her, and she was smart enough to go limp in the toilet, pretend she was dead. Some people came and he ran off.
Had it not been for those people, another woman would have surely died at the hands of the killer. But this time, Artez Hammonds would be caught, taken to trial, and convicted of trying to kill the woman at the mini storage warehouse. But during all that, police still didn't know he was the man that killed Marilyn Mitchell. Now, had that woman at the storage warehouse died, we would have had a serial killer on our hands. And when did police finally figure out that he did kill Miss Mitchell? That part of the story tomorrow at 6.
The search for a man who police say committed one of the most despicable murders ever in Dothan spanned years. That even though he tried to kill again and was put in prison, but despite being behind bars, police still did not know he was their man. News 4's Ken Curtis with the break investigators so badly needed in part 5 of our series, The Chapelwood Killer.
Yeah, from that fateful day, May 15, 1990, there were many turns in the investigation. The probe into the brutal death of a young woman who had just graduated from college. But one of the biggest turns did not come until years later.
6 years after 22-year-old Marilyn Mitchell was brutally raped and stabbed to death in this Chapelwood neighborhood, police were still searching for her killer, even though he was right under their nose.
Artez Hammonds had been interviewed and let go.
But his alibi looked solid.
He had been in the house delivering furniture
the day before Marilyn was killed. But police believed his story, and Artez Hammonds was dismissed as a suspect and free to kill again. And he almost did, nearly murdering another woman a year later. For that crime, he was tried, convicted, and sent to prison. But police still didn't know Artez was the Chapelwood Killer. So close, yet so far away from solving Marilyn Mitchell's murder. Because of an FBI profile, a very bad one.
The chief set a lot of stock in that profile. He was adamant that this person was white.
But Artez Hammonds is black. Finally, police ditched that FBI profile and went to an out-of-town forensics expert who gave them some stunning news.
That your perpetrator on this crime is going to be black.
And that led them back to where they were only hours after Marilyn Mitchell was killed, to Artez Hammonds. They took DNA from him, and it matched. On the way out of that Chapelwood house, a very small drop of blood dripped to the floor.
We got the right person. Artez Hammonds is guilty.
A small drop of blood that did more to solve this case than all the investigators combined. But while police and prosecutors believed they finally had their man, they had to sell it in court. Would a jury believe it? Would a jury believe that Artez Hammonds was the Chapelwood Killer?
And we'll remember the trial of Artez Hammonds and see where he is today as we wrap up this series tonight at 10. Natasha.
All right, Ken, thanks so much. We'll put all 6.
Tonight we conclude our special series on one of the worst crimes in Dothan history, the murder of a young girl and the search for who murdered her. News 4's Ken Curtis traces the final steps of the Chapelwood Killer.
From the time 22-year-old Marilyn Mitchell was raped and killed in the Chapelwood townhome she was moving into, the case proved very challenging and frustrating for police. It took 6 long, agonizing years to solve, even though just hours after Marilyn was killed and raped, they questioned Artez Hammonds. Bob Sarles was one of many investigators on the case. Admitting hindsight is 20/20, he now wishes that Hammond's alibi would have been scrutinized more closely. Hammonds had delivered furniture to Marilyn's home the day before she was killed. Then there was the forensics investigation by state experts. Was it properly done?
In my opinion, and from the evidence that came out after the arrest, it had not.
But Artez Hammonds after trying to kill yet another woman, was finally charged with Marilyn's death and ready to stand trial on a charge of capital murder. Wayne May has worked at WTVY for nearly 30 years. One of his many assignments, covering that trial.
He came across as a very cold and calculating individual.
After days of testimony, a Houston County jury found Artez Hammonds guilty, and Judge Larry Anderson sentenced him to death. But justice? Justice for killing a young woman about to be married with a new job, a new home, and a promising nursing career?
My daughter is not with us anymore. How can anyone have closure when they have lost their future? Like we lost Marilyn.
So none of this, well, they may put an innocent man to death. No, sir, the DNA shows it's Artez Hammonds, and that death sentence awaits him and can't get here quick enough.
An execution that will, for many, finally close the book on perhaps the most heinous crime ever in Dothan. A crime that only in a few minutes and 38 stab wounds later snuffed out Marilyn Mitchell's life. A crime that left a good middle-class neighborhood scared out of its wits. Crime by a man that will always be remembered as the Chapelwood Killer.